For 50 years, my existence, my profession, and my very identity have been anchored in the bedrock conviction that the cosmos operates within a framework that can be anticipated and understood. The motion of celestial bodies, I have always thought, could be measured and the principles governing them trusted implicitly. This assurance stemmed from the equations, which, without fail, yielded results that matched reality. It was nurtured by the robust theories of general relativity and quantum mechanics, theories that had stood the test of the most incisive scrutiny and the most rigorous experimental validation. My vocation was forged in the furnace of unwavering belief that physics, by its very nature, does not deceive. The universe, I imagined, was an intricate yet decipherable conundrum, a vast mechanism. And we, humanity, were steadily, painstakingly deciphering its blueprints. However, after a lifetime steeped in this certainty, I find myself occupying the uncomfortable position of having to utter a truth that every scientist would recoil from. We were mistaken about 3IATLAS. It is not a claim of minor deviation or mere miscalculation. It is a comprehensive and catastrophic error. If you are enthralled by the enigmatic nature of 3IATLAS and are eager to explore more mind-bending narratives about the cosmos, please express your engagement by indicating your appreciation. Each acknowledgement serves as a beacon, keeping the quest for the unknown alive and demonstrating that humankind remains attentive. From the very instant this entity entered our field of observation, appearing as a subtle, anomalous glimmer in a region where illumination is inconceivable, we embarked on a journey based on an assumption. The very foundation of our initial understanding was rooted in a profound sense of security, a security derived from routine, from the unquestioned familiarity of the known, and even a touch of intellectual arrogance. This comfortable assumption would prove immensely toxic, poisoning every subsequent conclusion drawn about the extraordinary object before us. We gazed upon its faint, ghostly luminous ring, the delicate, drifting veil surrounding its nucleus, and reassured ourselves and the world watching that we were witnessing an interstellar traveler composed of frozen water and cosmic dust. We christened it a comet. That single, seemingly simple word, comet, became a constraining container. It represented the familiar. It signified safety. When we observed the hyperbolic path it etched across the sky, the unmistakable arc betraying its origin far beyond the familiar embrace of our solar system, a wave of relief washed over us. Our established models sprang effortlessly into action. We reveled in the comfort of the known. After all, comets, we told ourselves, we comprehended. Comets behaved with predictable regularity. They journeyed towards the sun. They warmed under its distant gaze. They released their volatile ices through vents. They unveiled a breathtaking tail, and they obeyed the simple, ancient, and unbreakable laws of gravity. However, Oumuamua stubbornly refused to conform to this familiar template. From the very beginning, it defied our models with alarming persistence. Its outgassing exhibited a peculiar and unsettling pattern. Its intrinsic brightness fluctuated in ways that baffled prediction. Its trajectory displayed minute, nearly imperceptible deviations from the expected path, betraying influences beyond the sun's gravity alone. Instead of retreating to reconsider our fundamental assumption, instead of daring to challenge the core premise that bound our understanding, we forcefully pressed this enigmatic object into the narrow boxes of our comprehension. We persisted in declaring it a natural object, an ordinary visitor from the stars. We offered public assurances that it was entirely explainable within our current frameworks. Even as the raw, unvarnished data, the pure, cold, and absolute numbers began to whisper a different, more profoundly unsettling narrative, a narrative that contradicted everything we believed.
We deliberately ignored their insistent voice. We treated it, in our stubbornness, like a frozen dead relic, refusing to acknowledge the unsettling possibility that it might be something entirely unexpected. A lifeless rock and ice, adrift in the vastness of space for countless eons, was, for a time, explained away through a series of anomalies that were dismissed as peculiarities of an obscure and distant genesis. Theorists patched their models, crafted new narratives to explain its behavior, and did everything in their power to avoid the stark reality. Yet the truth was far more intricate and intentional than they had ever imagined. It was this intentionality that kept me awake in the dead of night, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. This was not just about the object itself, it was about the failure of our methods. It was the chilling realization that the very system we had placed our trust in, the scientific process that I had devoted my life to, had been fundamentally flawed from the very start. We had been ensnared by our own desire for the universe to conform to our understanding and our need for familiarity. We were not examining a mere comet. We were investigating an enigma so profound that it defied the laws of physics I had championed for decades. And now, confronted with irrefutable evidence, the only honest and scientific response I can offer is this: everything we believed about 3IATLAS must be dismantled. Every research paper, every theoretical model, every conclusion must be discarded. We must start anew, rebuilding our understanding from the very foundations, beginning anew. The universe has presented us with something we were utterly unprepared for, and we are only just beginning to grasp the depth, the magnitude, and the peril of our oversight. As three-eyed Atlas emerged into our telescope's field of view, a familiar sequence unfolded. Our automated instruments dutifully logged every expected parameter, and that initial, deceptive sense of recognition lulled us into complacency, steering us straight towards profound misunderstanding. The faint, shimmering coma encircling its nucleus, that ethereal veil of gas and dust, possessed a seductive lure. It whispered tales of composition, melting ices, the gentle direct transition from solid to gas, the very definition of a dirty snowball. Its trajectory, that sweeping, high-velocity, hyperbolic arc slicing through our solar system, spoke eloquently of distant, exotic origins, painting the picture of a solitary traveler hailing from another star's domain. Even the comet's early outburst patterns, its characteristic brightening and fading in response to solar proximity, seemed to perfectly mirror the behavior documented for every other interstellar visitor cataloged in the contemporary astronomical era. The evidence, presented so cohesively, seemed utterly convincing, almost flawless, until the subtle fractures began to appear. For the more deeply we observed, the richer the data set grew, the more the universe seemed to resist our assumptions, pushing back with counter-evidence. It felt almost as if the cosmos itself was mocking our misplaced confidence. We kept discovering subtle anomalies, hints that this particular object was operating outside the well-worn rulebook we had followed so blindly. Yet, rather than challenging the fundamental premise, the very bedrock of our calm, well-established comet theory, we chose the path of least resistance. We began adding exception upon exception to the narrative, inventing exotic, unverifiable mechanisms. We proposed bizarre, speculative formation histories that defied conventional wisdom. We clung to the notion that a towering mountain of ad hoc excuses could somehow prop up a theory rapidly crumbling under its own weight. And then October arrived. That was the month when the first undeniable catastrophic fracture tore through the entire carefully constructed illusion. As 3IATLAS journeyed perilously closer to our Sun, it entered a region of space where the Sun's gravitational influence truly tightened its grip, unleashing forces beyond our initial predictions. Based on all the equations I have ever taught and every fundamental law governing the universe, this object's velocity should have inevitably increased as it fell towards the most massive body within our solar system. That, after all, is precisely what gravity accomplishes. Yet this particular object performed an action deemed impossible. It began to slow down. The initial decrease was not dramatic. For a short period, it registered only as a few meters per second, easily dismissed as statistical fluctuation or a potential sensor malfunction.
However, within a matter of days, this subtle trend became clearly measurable, and within a week, it had become utterly undeniable. This was not a momentary blip, but a sustained deceleration, a massive and continuous braking maneuver, utterly beyond the capability of any natural comet under any conceivable circumstance. We sought desperately, with a kind of religious fervor, to reconcile this observation with our existing models. We hurled every known explanation at the problem. We suggested it might be non-gravitational drag. But drag from what? The solar wind? The pressure exerted by solar radiation? These forces, while capable of exerting influence, are infinitely minuscule. They are sufficient to propel a lightweight solar sail over decades, not to slow down a mountain-sized object by kilometers per second. The notion was patently absurd. We then turned to the most common explanation invoked for cometary anomalies: outgassing jets. We theorized that as the object warmed in proximity to the sun, its ice was sublimating directly into gas and venting violently from its surface, acting like countless tiny thrusters. This phenomenon is indeed real and observed in comets. However, for outgassing to produce the significant deceleration observed, the jets would have needed to be perfectly, continuously, and powerfully oriented from its leading face directly along its line of travel. The sheer impossibility of achieving and maintaining such precise directional thrust across a massive, irregular object rendered this explanation equally untenable. The celestial body in question manifested an extraordinary phenomenon: a natural comet venting gases, yet doing so with startling randomness and chaotic intensity. Jets of material erupted unpredictably from fissures and structural weaknesses, causing the entire object to tumble and spin through the void. This chaotic motion fundamentally differed from controlled propulsion. A sustained, precise, rear-facing thrust would indicate artificial maneuvering, propulsion itself. Despite exhaustive scrutiny across the entirety of established physical theory, we sought an explanation that would preserve our original comet hypothesis. We discovered only a profound silence, cold and unyielding. The empirical data presented a clear narrative, while decades of scientific training vehemently declared such a conclusion impossible. Yet hesitation persisted within us, a difficult admission. The scientific community, in that moment, faltered. We remained anchored to familiar labels, comfortable theoretical frameworks, and a fragile sense of dominion over cosmic understanding. Embracing the undeniable truth revealed by the telemetry data demanded confronting a far deeper unease. The object, designated as the 3-eyed Atlantean body, was not merely adrift. It was exhibiting behavior. That singular word, behavior, transformed the entire context. A rock drifts inertly. A comet reacts passively to solar forces. A machine behaves purposefully. It follows instructions, possesses intent, executes complex maneuvers. This celestial entity was demonstrably, deliberately, and with tremendous energy actively rewriting its own trajectory. It was actively contesting the gravitational pull of our own sun, choosing its course rather than being passively guided. This realization marked the decisive moment. It was the instant we should have discarded established textbooks and inaugurated a revolutionary new paradigm. We should have begun anew from absolute fundamentals, asking the most elementary, profound question: what is this phenomenon? Regrettably, we did not act. A paralyzing fear gripped us, fear of professional ridicule and the chaotic implications unleashed by accepting the undeniable truth. Our journey towards this revelation was paved not with malice, but with a profound hesitation. We consciously chose the comforting embrace of the familiar over the daunting challenge of confronting the unknown. This preference for ease led us to move forward with unsettling confidence and a fatal kind of simplicity. Unbeknownst to us, a powerful and unpredictable force lay in wait, poised to strike. While our limited perspective fixated on understanding the broader patterns of a distant comet, an entirely different, carefully orchestrated event was unfolding. A guided entity, shrouded in mystery, prepared to execute its next calculated step. The universe, however, remained unsatisfied with simply challenging our understanding. It was far from finished dismantling the very foundation of our assumptions. Its work with us was only just beginning. Simultaneously, our technological sentinels, our powerful telescopes, snapped to full alert. Their instruments, previously scanning the cosmos with a degree of focused curiosity, now sharpened their gaze with intense precision. Simultaneously, an unprecedented flood of new data, arriving from every possible vantage point across our global network of observatories, began to pour in. This higher-resolution information acted like a corrosive acid on the fragile veneer of our perceived cosmic order. The illusion of familiarity, carefully constructed by years of observation, began to fracture and collapse, piece by painful piece. The most devastating blow to our outdated theories did not come from the expected quarters of deep space or theoretical physics. It struck instead from the very surface we thought we knew. High above the rust-colored plains of Mars, an orbiting sentinel named Mars Express captured images of such astonishing clarity and structural precision that they instantly paralyzed the scientific minds who examined them. The sheer perfection was so overwhelming that it initially felt like an artifact, a glitch in the data itself. We were confronted with geometric patterns, hexagonal grids, arranged with a flawless mathematical regularity utterly alien to natural processes.
Nature, as we know it, does not produce such exactitude. We observed perfectly circular apertures, each one identical in diameter, spaced with unwavering uniformity along the structure's equator. We saw the smooth, cylindrical forms rising from the main body, their surfaces unnervingly straight and devoid of the rough, jagged textures typical of celestial bodies. These forms bore the unmistakable hallmarks of engineered components, not the chaotic, scarred landscape sculpted by random cosmic collisions over unimaginable eons. There was no chaos present. There was no jaggedness. There was nothing that remotely resembled the violent, scarred surface carved by asteroids and comets over billions of years. The evidence spoke with a chilling clarity. This was constructed, not created. The profound truth confronted us, yet in the face of undeniable evidence, we stubbornly clung to the comforting veil of illusion. We who prided ourselves on our rationality, the planet's most logical minds, offered explanations that felt flimsy and inadequate. We spoke of unusual crystalline growths, intricate formations born from natural processes. We theorized about geometric fracturing occurring under the most extreme cold conditions imaginable. We even invoked pareidolia, that peculiar quirk of the human brain which desperately seeks meaning and patterns within random noise. Anything seemed preferable to embracing the chilling alternative, the possibility that we were gazing upon deliberate design. For if that were true, everything, absolutely everything, would be irrevocably altered. Natural processes, the universe's seemingly chaotic dance of atoms and gravity, do not choose symmetry. They do not possess the will to carve precise angles with unwavering accuracy, nor do they construct repeating complex patterns observable on a kilometer-wide scale. Yet there they were, illuminated against the profound blackness of space, staring back at us across millions of miles of utterly empty void. Their shapes possessed an undeniable quality of being placed, not merely formed. They screamed intent with their very geometry. Even the undeniable photographic proof of these geometric structures proved insufficient to shatter our collective denial. We are rigorously trained to trust nature first. We are conditioned to exhaust every possible mundane, everyday explanation, no matter how implausibly improbable, before the faintest whisper of the extraordinary even crosses our lips. But with the arrival of 3IATLASes, those mundane explanations evaporated faster than we could conjure them. The sheer scale and precision defied every natural hypothesis we threw at it. Deep down, every single individual felt the same cold certainty rising within them. We were desperately trying to force a square peg into the shape of a comet. We were attempting to fit the essence of a machine into the bland category of a simple rock.
The universe was trying, with unwavering clarity, to show us something entirely different, something profoundly alien to our understanding, something we were not, and perhaps never could be, truly ready to face. The imperfections in our existing theory had ceased to be mere fissures. They had transformed into chasms that threatened to upend our entire understanding of the cosmos. Then the revelation arrived, stripping away any remaining comfort we had clung to. This was not a mere visual anomaly, something we could attribute to faulty perception or malfunctioning sensors. It was cold, hard, and fundamentally data-driven. It was the chemical signature of 3IATLAS, a fingerprint so peculiar, so profoundly incongruous, that it shattered the last remnants of our failing comet theory. When the spectroscopic data, the light from the object broken down into its constituent elements, arrived from the James Webb Space Telescope, we anticipated seeing the familiar absorption bands of interstellar ice. We were in search of the strong absorption bands of water, H2O. We expected to see methane, ammonia, the simple primordial building blocks that define every comet we have ever studied, both from our own solar system and those that had traversed from beyond. That is what comets are. Instead, what we found baffled our comprehension. The object was composed almost entirely of carbon dioxide, an overwhelming ocean of CO2 ice, while water, the most common and fundamental ingredient in all known cometary material, was nearly absent. It was not simply low, it was practically undetectable. This should not just be rare, it should be physically impossible. No known formation process in the universe, no model of stellar or planetary formation we have ever conceived produces an object like that naturally.
The entire astronomical community faced a profound mystery, staring at an extraterrestrial body whose chemical composition fundamentally contradicted everything they believed possible. How could such a large object exist with such an astonishing lack of ice? Faced with this contradiction, scientists meticulously repeated their simulations countless times.
They scrutinized and revised every proposed chemical pathway, seeking an explanation within the known laws of physics and chemistry. They even conceived wildly exotic and improbable birth environments, desperately trying to invent any plausible scenario that could account for this anomaly. Perhaps it formed in the atmosphere of a bizarre carbon-rich gas giant planet, an environment radically different from our own solar system. Perhaps it represented the shattered, exposed core of an ancient, unknown type of planet, stripped of its icy mantle through some cataclysmic event. But all these models collapsed under the sheer weight of their own improbability. Each required a universe operating under rules fundamentally different from those we know. At a certain point, the data itself began to behave in ways that no natural object could explain. The chemical fingerprint stopped resembling anything observed in nature and started to look like something else entirely. It looked like the residue of engineering. It looked like materials that had been deliberately arranged, altered, or processed in ways that defied natural processes. It looked like the exhaust products of a technology or the refined structural material of a craft. It was starkly different from the random, dirty ice composition typical of a comet. And yet, even as this chemical impossibility stared them in the face, demanding an explanation beyond natural origins, scientists still clung tenaciously to their fading theories. The profound strangeness of the object forced them to confront the unsettling possibility that their understanding of the universe might be fundamentally incomplete. We persistently referred to it as a comet. We disseminated formal statements, ostensibly describing a carbon-rich interstellar comet, as though appending an adjective could somehow reconcile the profound and irreconcilable contradiction inherent in its nature. In truth, even if not spoken to the wider audience, we were fundamentally deceiving ourselves. Confronting the genuine reality, the absolute core truth, necessitated venturing into an entirely unmapped territory, a realm bereft of any guide or compass, a domain stripped of the familiar security and reassurance offered by well-established, trusted physical laws. We are creatures who seek comfort, even the most rigorous scientists, and that comfort resides within defined categories, within neatly labeled boxes that we comprehend. Yet, 3IATLAS categorically refused to conform to such limitations.
Each subsequent observation was not merely exhibiting peculiarity, it was demonstrably incorrect, wrong in a manner that felt deliberately orchestrated. It evoked the sensation that the very object was whispering, a quiet, mocking murmur directly into our collective consciousness, asserting that our entire investigative path was fundamentally flawed. Deep within, all those who scrutinized the raw data intuitively grasped the significance of the chemical signatures being emitted. Such signatures, nature in its familiar form did not generate, at least not the nature we understood and studied. And yet, the universe prepared one final, devastating revelation for us, one ultimate anomaly so deeply profound, so utterly impossible within our current comprehension that all preceding strangeness would subsequently appear almost trivial and insignificant in stark comparison. This is the precise juncture where the narrative of 3IATLAS ceases to behave like an unremarkable celestial body forged in the profound silence of interstellar space, and commences exhibiting behavior implying recollection of its own provenance. As the object continued its trajectory through our cosmic neighborhood, our telescopes, now meticulously monitoring its subtlest movements, registered a critical deviation from expected behavior. Instead of its luminosity gradually diminishing or intensifying in a predictable, gentle arc as its distance changed, its brightness manifested erratic pulsations. It fluctuated in uneven waves as if some internal mechanism was straining against unseen forces, achieving momentary stability only to fracture and destabilize once more. The sudden pulse shimmered across the cosmic void, a blinding flare of reflected sunlight coinciding with an almost imperceptible shift in rotational drift. This precise synchronization formed a pattern of remarkable regularity, so perfectly correlated it seemed meticulously crafted rather than mere chance. A subtle wobble would precede a flash, a corrective maneuver would trigger another burst of light. Scientists grappled to explain the phenomenon. Researchers deployed every analytical tool at their disposal. They investigated possibilities ranging from thermal cracking within the object's structure to volatile jets propelling fragments towards the sun, or simply the obscuring shadows cast by unseen debris. They exhausted every known mechanism outlined in the cosmic rulebook governing celestial bodies. Yet not a single established model, not one, could replicate the rhythmic, meticulously timed signature being observed through powerful telescopes stationed in Hawaii, Chile, and orbiting high above Earth. Even more perplexing, the pulses and flashes intensified following each structural rupture, each anomalous maneuver. It was as if the object itself was compensating for its inherent instability. It was as though it possessed a capacity for adjustment, for correction, for rudimentary learning.
This was not the behavior exhibited by inert space debris. This was the behavior of a complex system operating under duress. This was the behavior of a machine with active stabilization, a machine that was damaged, reacting in a desperate attempt to prevent its own disintegration. When a celestial body, presumed to be a simple comet, begins to react to its own failures, to actively compensate for its own damage, the nature of the study fundamentally changes. You are no longer examining mere ice and dust. You are studying intention. And whether that intention stems from the properties of some unknown, exotic form of life, or represents the sophisticated behavior of ancient machinery, or signifies something entirely beyond our current understanding and vocabulary, no one feels prepared to voice it aloud. As 3IATLAS ventured ever deeper into the unknown, its path defying conventional understanding, a glimmer of desperate hope flickered within the scientific community. We had marveled at its inexplicable maneuvers, its shifting chemical signatures, and its defiance of established physical laws. Yet in our collective reasoning, we summoned up a final, albeit bleak, expectation that this enigmatic object, this anomaly of the cosmos, might be succumbing to the natural order of decay. We anticipated a spectacle of chaos, a final act of dissolution as unseen internal forces tore it apart. We braced ourselves for a scene of fragmentation, a dispersal into inert pieces that would obey the universal tendencies of celestial debris, dissipating into a cloud of tumbling fragments that would eventually succumb to the mundane laws of physics. The expectation was that, having demonstrated behaviors that staggered the mind, 3IATLAS would now fulfill the familiar narrative of cosmic objects. The end, chaotic but inevitable, dissolving into the nothingness of space, a release from the tension of its inexplicable existence. However, the universe, in its infinite capacity for surprise, had other plans. Instead of the anticipated scattering and dissolution, the debris that had been expanding in unpredictable directions did something profoundly unsettling. The chaotic cloud, the very essence of disorder that we had waited to witness, did not dissipate. Instead, it halted in its tracks. Then, as if obeying a silent command, it reversed its trajectory. The cloud began to contract, to narrow, drawing in upon itself, coalescing into a precise and almost coordinated stream that trailed behind the central mass of the object with unnatural clarity.
It was a spectacle that defied comprehension. The fragments, which we had expected to tumble aimlessly, now moved with a purposeful alignment, forming a thin, disciplined line that followed the main core of 3IATLAS. It was not the disarray of a dead, lifeless remnant, but rather the formation of a fleet, a silent escort of smaller craft trailing a leading vessel.
The observatories across Europe were among the first to capture this phenomenon on camera. The team operating the Very Large Telescope were the initial to report their findings. Their observations revealed that the trailing fragments were not merely adhering to the same orbital path out of inertia. Instead, they exhibited a behavior that hinted at a deeper, more mysterious coordination, a movement that suggested an intelligence or a force beyond our current understanding. The observed movement defied conventional understanding, exhibiting an unnerving, almost impossible precision. The trailing fragments mirrored the velocity shifts of the leading piece with uncanny accuracy. Should the primary fragment experience even the faintest deceleration, the others reacted instantaneously, altering their own speed to maintain parity. Similarly, if the central mass deviated from its course by merely a fraction of a degree, the entire stream executed a flawless collective correction, adjusting their individual vectors to achieve perfect alignment. Such behavior is entirely alien to naturally occurring clusters of space debris. They cannot achieve such coordination. Gravity, the sole force theoretically acting upon the scattered material, proved utterly incapable of orchestrating this kind of perfectly synchronized, instantaneous movement across such significant distances. Gravity operates as a differential force, meaning it would inherently tend to pull disparate fragments apart, not possess the subtle control required to bind them into such a rigid, persistent formation. This extraordinary phenomenon, the formation flying characteristic displayed by what had been dismissed as inert, dead shrapnel, compelled analysts to fundamentally reconsider not only the nature of 3IATLAS itself, but also its potential actions. The implications were deeply unsettling. Was the core fragment actively emitting some form of energy or signal undetectable by current instruments? Could it be projecting a low-power beam, a guiding force specifically designed to hold the disparate pieces together? Alternatively, was it generating an invisible field, magnetic perhaps, or even a localized gravitational influence that exerted a binding force, compelling these fragments to adhere to its trajectory against all natural tendencies? Each subsequent dataset, each new observation emerging from the instruments invariably raised another profoundly disturbing, deeply unsettling question. Within scientific circles, a palpable shift occurred. The quiet, cold fear that began to echo through previously confident ranks replaced their former arrogant certainty. The core realization was terrifyingly straightforward. If these fragments were behaving not as random debris, but as a coordinated system, then the object had not been destroyed. It had not died. It had not simply broken apart. It had undergone a transformation. It had deployed.
And whatever 3IATLAS once was, critical pieces of it might still be functioning, still capable of purposeful action. The universe suddenly demanded the undivided attention of every observatory and research institution. No longer could the enigmatic fragments of 3IATLAS be dismissed as relics of a forgotten cosmic event. A phenomenon of profound significance had emerged, compelling scientists worldwide to shift from passive observation to urgent investigation. The catalyst for this paradigm shift occurred during routine monitoring of the fragment's perfectly synchronized celestial dance. While telescopes tracked their motion across the night sky, a specialized deep space radio observatory nestled in the Australian outback captured something extraordinary. This sophisticated instrument, engineered to detect the faintest echoes resonating from the infancy of the cosmos, registered an anomaly vastly different from its usual cosmic whispers.
The signal wasn't transmitted through radio waves. It manifested within the very reflections of sunlight bouncing off the fragments themselves. This emission was astonishingly faint, so delicate that it existed far beneath the noise floor of standard astronomical data processing. Ordinary signal-to-noise ratios rendered it invisible, a mere murmur lost in the static of the universe. Yet, upon closer inspection and patient analysis, a distinct intentionality began to surface. Careful examination revealed a structured pattern embedded within the modulation. It wasn't random static, it was a sequence, a deliberate arrangement discernible only after immense computational effort. Scientists painstakingly gathered data, accumulated over several hundred hours of observation. By meticulously filtering countless terabytes of information and then stacking it, aligning and combining the subtle signals across time, the underlying rhythm finally emerged from the background noise. Initial reactions were profound skepticism. Astronomers scrutinizing the data were convinced they had encountered an artifact, a hidden flaw within their complex instrumentation, or a subtle error introduced during data processing. It simply defied natural explanation, leading them to consider every possible calibration mistake or computational ghost. But this pattern refused dismissal. It persisted, manifesting independently in data streams captured by diverse telescopes scattered across different continents. Its appearance was consistent, observed under varying atmospheric conditions and across multiple nights. The evidence became irrefutable. This was not a machine malfunction or a data anomaly. It was a genuine signal originating from the fragments. Further analysis unveiled a chillingly precise correlation. The modulation intensified specifically when the fragments momentarily altered their configuration, drawing closer together in their synchronized orbit.
Most perturbingly, the signal's characteristics shifted in perfect harmony with the rotation of the larger body. As Atlas turned, revealing different facets, so too did the pattern and intensity of the emitted light pulse change. But the most unsettling revelation concerned the signal's mathematical structure. Embedded within its rhythmic pulse was a harmonic spacing, a set of frequencies related by simple integer ratios. This signature was entirely alien to the chaotic, tumbling behavior characteristic of natural asteroids or cometary debris. The harmonic clarity and specificity suggested intelligent design, or at the very least, an artificial system. This discovery led some researchers, speaking in hushed tones reflecting both awe and unease, to speculate that the signal bore an uncanny resemblance to a diagnostic ping. It appeared to be a systematic emission, the kind generated by a complex technological system attempting to map its immediate surroundings, or perhaps more disturbingly, assessing its own internal integrity following some unknown event. The implication was stark. The 3IATLAS fragments were not inert remnants, but potentially active entities, perhaps even functioning components of a vast, unknown mechanism conducting an internal survey of its own nature and environment. The quiet curiosity had transformed into a profound and unsettling presence. The scientific community reacted to the initial revelation about 3IATLAS with immediate and visceral rejection. The notion that this peculiar, enigmatic object, previously catalogued merely as an astronomical anomaly, could be actively interacting with its environment rather than simply reacting to it was met with near-violent dismissal. If the peculiar ping were genuine, it implied a disturbing reality. 3IATLAS possessed awareness. The implications were so unsettling that theories proliferated rapidly on encrypted servers, each subsequent hypothesis more profoundly uncomfortable than the last.
Amid this escalating speculation, one question persisted, refusing to be silenced or marginalized. If the observed modulation was undeniably intentional, then the crucial query remained: who or what was this signal intended for? As the strange rhythmic modulation of the object's lights continued its insistent cadence, an even more profoundly unnerving event began to unfold. The trajectory of 3IATLAS, the path that had seemed so definitively established following its violent initial orbital capture, commenced shifting once more. These were not the massive, powerful propulsion burns that characterized its dramatic arrival. Instead, these movements were infinitesimal, almost delicate adjustments, subtle, surgical bends applied to its course. These minute, deliberate nudges subtly altered the object and its entire fragmented formation, steering them onto a new path entirely unforeseen.
The first indication of this profound deviation was detected by tracking teams stationed at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. They only perceived the shift when 3IATLAS and its entire convoy of fragments veered significantly, yet precisely away from their projected arc. The margin of deviation was not large, but it was distinct and exact, rendering any notion of mere coincidence utterly impossible to sustain. Hours later, the object corrected its course again, sliding seamlessly into a new orientation. This new orientation aligned it almost perfectly with the incoming angle of a distant high-energy solar wind front. The timing and alignment seemed to suggest a chilling possibility. 3IATLAS was not merely drifting through the void on some blind, ancient path. It was navigating. It was choosing its course. It was following a route, a destination that none of our sophisticated predictions had ever contemplated or accounted for. Faced with this data, we were forced to abandon all our comfortable, familiar explanations. The box neatly labeled comet lay shattered. The box labeled natural phenomenon had been consumed by fire. We stood now in a new, uncharted territory, staring at a truth for which our minds possessed no categories, no words. One possibility presented itself, stark and startling.
It was technology. This explanation, while astonishing, held a certain simplicity, perhaps even a certain humanity to it, offering a framework, however unsettling, within which to begin to understand what we had witnessed. We find ourselves gazing upon a mysterious craft, a probe, or perhaps a relic dispatched from the farthest reaches of a distant star. Its purpose might have been to observe, gather data, or maybe even establish contact with nascent civilizations such as our own. Every detail seen conforms precisely to this scenario. The astonishing maneuver witnessed was, in fact, a precisely controlled orbital insertion, executed with power. The geometric shapes, including hexagons and circles, serve as integral components, possibly engine ports or sensor arrays. The peculiar chemical signature observed is not of natural origin. Rather, it stems from the processed materials of its hull or the unconventional fuel it employs. The fragments seen moving in unison are not mere debris. They constitute an independent squadron of drones. The soft, modulated ping is indicative of its communication or diagnostic systems. This artifact is unequivocally a machine, aged, potent, and currently stationed within our solar system. Moreover, there exists another, even more startling possibility. It might represent a form of life. This notion is both more alien and profound. We might be observing a life form so dissimilar to any we are familiar with that our language fails to describe it. It is not of the biological kind we are accustomed to, nor a creature composed of water and carbon.
Perhaps it is a vast, silicon-based processor of energy, having evolved in the cold, harsh vacuum between stars. Its very existence would necessitate a complete overhaul of our understanding of biology, complexity, and the adaptability of life itself. The braking maneuver was not merely a burn, it was a metabolic act. The fragments are not mere drones, they are its progeny, or limbs, extensions of its consciousness. The modulated signal is not just a ping. It could represent something entirely unique, an expression of a reality operating on dimensions we cannot perceive, an entity manifesting from the deepest, most enigmatic processes of the cosmos itself. It is not merely a transient traveler passing through our cosmic neighborhood. It is an intrinsic part of the universe, possessing both awareness and agency. What renders this situation profoundly unsettling, transforming it into an existential crisis, stems not solely from the nature of this entity. The true horror lies in its deliberate actions. It has consciously altered its trajectory, interrupting a voyage that would have carried it eternally onward. To achieve this reversal, it has expended a force so immense, so beyond our estimation, that it borders on the inconceivable. It has canceled its escape, choosing instead to remain within our solar system. Its presence is marked by a deliberate, persistent orbit, one that recurrently and predictably brings it into the vicinity of the region where our own planet, Earth, resides. There is undeniable evidence of awareness. It knows of our existence. Its movements, its very position, suggest a conscious targeting directed at our world. The faint modulated signal it emits, that rhythmic harmonic ping detected across the void, is not the result of random chance or cosmic noise. Its pattern suggests interaction. We now believe it is attempting to communicate. It is engaging with us. And humanity stands utterly unprepared. We possess no established protocol, no historical precedent, no diplomatic playbook for responding to such an overture from beyond the stars. Every potential response carries within it the seeds of unimaginable, species-ending consequences. The simple act of sending a signal back in reply, the deployment of a powerful broadcast aimed towards its location, could irrevocably expose our technological capabilities, reveal our precise whereabouts within the galaxy, and lay bare our deepest vulnerabilities to a consciousness whose motives remain entirely unknown.
Merely observing offered raw data points, a cold collection of facts and figures, yet it provided no insight into the fundamental intentions driving this immense, deliberate entity. We stood, locked in a profound cosmic standoff, a tense impasse where we were the only party lacking any comprehension of the underlying rules governing the interaction. The sheer implications of this situation were staggering, defying easy comprehension. Humanity, it was now irrefutably established, was no longer alone within the boundaries of our own solar system. We were no longer gazing wistfully at distant stars, consumed by abstract wonder. We possessed a tangible presence, a visitor, one demonstrably active and intelligent, stationed within our own cosmic backyard. This singular fact shattered previous conceptions, revealing a universe far stranger, far more complex, and buzzing with potential in ways we had never dared to imagine. The 3IATLAS had arrived. Its intelligence was undeniable, its actions deliberate and purposeful, and it possessed a clear and conscious awareness of our existence. With its arrival, it had irrevocably forced us to confront the single most critical question humanity as a species had ever been compelled to answer. How do we respond when we are no longer the sole players within our neighborhood of the cosmos? The comforting illusion of understanding the established rules had been irrevocably shattered. We had been profoundly wrong. As a scientist, I am compelled to acknowledge with humbling clarity that we were wrong about everything we believed we knew. The moment of reckoning had arrived, the moment where our outdated assumptions, those cherished models of reality, had to be abandoned, burned away, and consigned to the annals of forgotten folly. The moment had arrived, indeed, where we, as a species, must collectively decide. We must decide who we are, confronted by the undeniable presence of something far greater, far older, and far more advanced than ourselves.